space in the optimal way necessary, and respond in a timely fashion. For example, if the system came back with a response saying move forward after the talk is over, is of no use. Right? So we have to sense meaningfully, take the right kind of information required, analyze it in a timely fashion, and respond in a timely fashion. This is, to me, the crux of being smart. What is the kind of historical data, like we saw before, that you bring to bear on analysis, real-time data, aggregated, disaggregated data of various kinds, census information. So not all of this is coming from sensors. That's what I wanted to first remember. And knowing what part of the historical information to use, combine that with real-time information to get a response in a timely fashion, depends on who you want to send it to, when do you send it, send the information for further processing, or send the recommendation for further processing, where do you do it, and so on. So another aspect of this smartness is that smartness is not simply a real-time phenomenon, which is enabled by sensors. We have to apply smartness at all times, all stages of the utilization or the design or the deployment, the initialization of the system to respond to a certain specific point in time and during the runtime. For example, this auditorium would have been designed with a certain purpose, certain utility. That's a design time input that you have to take, analyze it in the context of all other inputs, and then decide which kind of configuration it should have, and so on. So that is one thing. Second is, we don't always, even smart people make mistakes, right? And so smart people learn from the mistakes. You all heard this before, right? We all make mistakes, so we have to be observant of what the mistakes produce and feed that back into our subsequent decision making. So past experience has to be exploited in the process so that we become smarter as days go by. Same thing is applicable to our systems. Now, sometimes we go to a service organization of the government and get the impression that they haven't learned from past mistakes. You see the same thing being heard again, being told to you again. There's no history. So all of that becomes easier to do now, to handle or to address with IT becoming available, but that's not the whole story. So this is the total picture for you. Sense meaningfully, analyze, and not just respond, but also remember what you did in the past and use it in a timely fashion. So if you string these words together, sense meaningfully, analyze, remember, timely, you get the term smart. So easy way to remember what the constituents of a smart city would be is to look at the components, and the meaningfulness of the thinking, of the sensing is very important to me, because otherwise you'll have a deluge of information, which usually happens, and you get lost in the processing of it, both mentally as well as in the context of a computer. And this is where, again, you recursively apply the notion of smartness when you answer these questions that I have put next to each of the boxes. So now you know where smart auditorium comes from. It collects information from design documents, from sensing that happens in real time, and in the context of all this information, does analysis, some of which has been done before, some of which is being done in real time, and then comes up with these numbers. So in the context of energy, we can apply this to all sorts of problems, like avoiding the consumption, which lights to turn off, for example, optimizing the demand-supply conundrum, flattening peaks of consumption is a very major problem, renewable resource integration, storing energy through batteries. So all of these are problems in the energy domain. They have corresponding analogs in other domains. And all of this, however, is possible today to address in a real-time sense, along with, or using information from what is available now, along with historical information, because of automated approaches being possible through advances in IT. So we have been working on many of these problems in the context of cities. I don't have time to go through all of them here, but I'll just mention some of the key phrases involved in what we do. One is urban flood management. Many of the students from IIT Bombay, the Center for Urban Science and Engineering. Can you wave your hands, guys? People know who you are. They're all there. Since I won't have time to describe them, and they are experts in this area, please feel free to talk to them, corner them, bug them with questions. Smart travel behavior. For example, people are going to be working from homes, order foods into their houses, and not spend the time going to a restaurant time is becoming precious, and so on. So what is the impact of this on urban life, in particular urban provisioning of transportation facilities? We have to exploit solar energy as much as possible. We don't do that as much today. Fortunately for you, the municipal government buildings are becoming available now and have deployed the solar panels on the rooftops. We are working with many of the organizations like that to assess the solar potential for buildings, including on the facades. And what is the issue here? You have to look at modeling these buildings, look at the geographical data available in terms of solar energy available, especially for facade solar, and use that estimation process to take runtime decisions and deployment decisions. We're also looking at this in the context of public health, a major problem in cities like Bombay or Mumbai. Both at the planning stage, how do you plan the location of many of these public health centers? And also, once they've been located, how do you make sure that community outreach takes place in a smart way and treatment takes place if there is any outbreak of such diseases? And finally, solid waste management is a major problem. We want to use as much as possible the technology available today. For example, crowdsourcing is one such technology. In the context of solid waste management, I want to sort of give you an anecdote. How many of you know how many toilets are there in Bombay? Public toilets. How do we guess this? How do we collect this information? If you have a solution, the municipal commissioner will want to hear from you. Because we've been looking at this as a crowdsourcing challenge. Don't have a solid, don't have a foolproof solution for this, but we're working on it. So one thing we would like to do is to train the kids when they're in school to avoid creating solid waste in the first place. How do you do this? We can create a virtual environment, like a game-playing environment. It's called gamification. It's a bad word as far as I'm concerned, but it's becoming popular, for creating a pro-environmental behavior among students. We have a nice prototype of a game which has been used to involve students while they are in the school, so that when they go back home, they can even educate the parents and the elders in the family. So the question now is, what age groups do you focus for such games? Again, part of the Smart City initiative, Smart City solution. All the other questions come up. What kind of segregation do you teach them about? What kind of bins do you talk about? How will they understand some of the differences? So with all of this in hand, we can solve the problem, or at least begin to address the problem of solid waste at the source, creation at the source. And the action item here is, how do you make the game available for schools? So if you're from an education institution, please talk to us. We would like to install one of these game consoles in your premises.
We're running out of time, please.
So last couple of slides, each individual solution can be handled in a fairly optimal way. When it comes to integrated provisioning of emergency infrastructure, things become much more difficult. For example, how do you make the fire engine installation be dependent on the ambulance installations and do the two together in an integrated fashion? Hard problem to solve in an optimization perspective, but has to be solved in the real world. So a larger question is, how do you make smart systems out of smart cities out of smart systems? Again, the same principle applies: sensing meaningfully, analyzing, and responding in timely fashion. But now these have to talk to each other. And talking to each other is the hardest thing to do in a municipal setting. So how do you do it in a step-by-step fashion and yet achieve the goal in order to make cities smart, meaning have the properties that we've been talking about from the beginning? So this is where I would like to stop here. I just want to leave this closing thought. Whenever we answer a question or decide on a particular problem, how to solve it, for instance, we are exercising our smartness. We do this all the time. In the government, this happens all the time. Among students, it happens all the time. So we all want to be smart. And to do that, we sense the environment. Whom am I talking to? analyze, and respond in a timely fashion. The third bullet is important. There's always a smarter way of doing something, which is why tomorrow it'll be smarter than today, and today we are smarter than yesterday, which is why our children become smarter than the parents. And finally, I think the most important question is how do you create cost-effective solutions with a short payback period? And this is where high-tech comes in, because with high-tech, believe it or not, we can create solutions with lower cost. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Professor Rangan Banerjee.
Thank you, sir. Let me introduce Professor Rangan Banerjee. He is the Post Marshall Chair Professor in the Department of Energy, Science and Engineering. He was responsible for setting up the new Department of Energy, Science and Engineering at IIT Mumbai in 2007. He was a faculty advisor to Team Shunya, which represented the IIT students in the solar decathlon in 2014, and they designed a fully operational solar house. He is also an adjunct faculty in the Department of Engineering and Public Policy in Carnegie Mellon University. Professor Rangan Banerjee.
It's always a challenge to be the last speaker, and especially before lunch. Unfortunately, I'm not really in the smart business, but I know the energy business, and I'm going to give you a perspective on what are the energy challenges for our cities. Okay, I have a number of slides. I'll skip some of them, but I'll make them available to you. And at the end of it, I'll try and put some perspective on where can smartness impact, and what is it that we should be thinking of, and how should we configure it. Okay, so energy needs of the city. We have multiple needs, and we all are familiar with it because we all live in cities. And we look at lighting, cooking, appliances, transport, motors, commercial, water pumping, and there's a significant role of electricity in this. So I'm focusing mainly on electricity. You know, offline, if you are interested in the other services, we can talk about that separately. So just to give you a mix, you can see the sort of relative magnitudes of cities. As cities develop, electricity starts getting a greater share. This is for Agra, this is a little old. You can see for Mumbai, and you can look at it in terms of the energy use per capita, compare it with, but we won't really bother about the numbers. You can look at, when you try to benchmark, one of the things that you may want to see is which city is better than the other, and which one is more efficient. Now, this is very tricky because various cities have different activities, so this benchmarking is always tricky, but it's still useful to do that. So two indices that you may want to look at is energy per person, CO2 per person, electricity per person. And this is from an Asia Green City Index. You can look it up, and you can look at population and area and this kind of things. So what are the challenges for the electricity sector? The first challenge that you must understand is that our supply is unable to meet demand. There are energy shortages, there are electricity and peak power shortages. There are other challenges which we have seen so far, and that's been happening: extreme natural events, failure of energy infrastructure, and today there is also the additional challenge of security and sabotage. Coupled with this is, as we look at growth, you have the emissions and sustainability challenge. And to add on, the last challenge which has been talked about so far, affordability and access. And these two are sort of counter things, and we should keep this in mind. Just to give you an idea, we have many of our cities, may not be in detail, this is a Wärtsilä report which reports the number of hours of load shedding in different cities in the country, and the timings as well as the region, as well as the seasons. And you'll find that significant number of hours of load shedding occur. And so there is a service which is not provided, there is a business opportunity, and if you can configure together. And the other thing that you must understand for electricity is that, you know, we have to supply electricity when people demand it. And so that affects, there is a variation in the electricity load pattern. See the load curves for Mumbai. You will see that we have a evening and a night peak, and then a valley region in the early mornings. And this is a daily variation, and you can see in each of this, because of that, you have to configure your infrastructure to meet those peaks, and it will not be utilized for a large part of the thing. So then there is a question of recouping your investments. Also, there are very significant growth rates. You look at the growth rates of all these cities, we are talking of 6%, 7%, 8%, 10% growth rates, and you need investments to meet that. You have seasonal variations. For instance, look at this graph. It shows you the Delhi summer and the Delhi winter loads. Very significant differences between all of this. So what are the possible strategies for cities? The one strategy is look at energy efficiency and demand side management. Look at enhanced use of renewables, rooftop photovoltaics, solar water heaters, waste to energy, zero energy and energy plus buildings, electric vehicles to modulate that load profile that we saw. We have to understand load and supply variability, have improved forecasting, demand response, and storage. And then we have to benchmark energy and emission performance of cities and localities. So actually speaking, today we can configure to you a renewable energy supply system for any end use that you want with the same amount of reliability. Of course, may not be at the same cost, but you can look at different end uses, and I'll just illustrate a couple of these. So for instance, you have these wind power systems on top of buildings. And if you look at it, most of the segments where we talk of the renewables are still